The rain had barely stopped when Emma tightened the belt of her worn coat and stood in front of the restaurant's glass doors. The golden glow from inside spilled out onto the wet pavement, making her feel even more out of place. Every car pulling up was sleek and polished, every guest stepping inside looked like they belonged to a world she only saw in magazines. Emma swallowed hard. She wasn't supposed to be here. This was her sister Clara's date, not hers. Clara, the elegant, glamorous one, with perfect hair, designer heels, and a smile that could charm any man. But Clara had brushed Emma's shoulder earlier that evening with a careless laugh and said, "Be a dear and go for me. It's just dinner, and he's some CEO. I can't be bothered tonight." Emma had protested. She wasn't dressed for it, didn't know what to say, and didn't understand why Clara couldn't just cancel. But Clara had already left for a party with her friends, leaving Emma with no choice. And now, here she was, clutching her thrift store handbag, standing in front of one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, trying to summon the courage to walk in. Her reflection in the glass doors made her wince. Her hair wasn't styled. Her shoes were scuffed from too many bus rides. She didn't look like someone a billionaire CEO would expect to meet. She whispered to herself, "Just go in, explain it's a mistake, and leave. He'll be angry, sure. But at least it will be over quickly." Inside, the maitre looked her up and down with polite curiosity, but said nothing as he checked the reservation list. "Mr. Alexander Hayes is waiting." "Right this way." "Miss." Her stomach dropped at the name. Even she had heard of him, the single dad CEO whose face was often on business magazines, whose reputation was cold, commanding, untouchable. The kind of man who could buy and sell her entire world without blinking. She nearly turned back, but the maitre d' was already leading her to the private corner table. Her heart pounded louder with each step. And then she saw him. Alexander Hayes sat with his straight dark suit sharp against the dim golden lighting. He glanced at his watch before lifting his gaze toward her. For a split second, his eyes narrowed in surprise. This was clearly not the woman he had been expecting. Emma froze, her hands trembling at her sides. Her plan to explain and leave suddenly tangled on her tongue. In that moment, she wished the ground would open up and swallow her whole. For a long, heavy moment, Emma felt like she had stepped into a courtroom, where every judgment would fall against her. Alexander Hayes's eyes locked on her. Piercing and sharp, the kind of gaze that stripped away excuses before they could even form. Emma's breath hitched. He was even more intimidating in person. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the quiet authority of someone who was used to commanding entire boardrooms. His features were cut with precision, strong jawline, steel, gray eyes, and the faintest crease on his forehead that told her he didn't tolerate surprises well. And she was nothing but a surprise. Her mouth opened, but all she managed was a stammer. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. There's been a mistake. My sister." He raised one hand, silencing her. The movement was not harsh, but it carried an undeniable authority. "Sit down." The words weren't shouted. They weren't even spoken loudly. But there was something in the firmness of his tone that rooted her to the spot. Against her better judgment, Emma obeyed, sliding into the chair opposite him. Her fingers twisted around the strap of her handbag on her lap, as if she could shield herself from his scrutiny. Alexander studied her, eyes narrowing slightly as if cataloging every detail: her nervous posture, her modest dress, the way she bit her lip to keep it from trembling. She was not the polished socialite he had been told he'd meet tonight. She was different. "Your sister," he finally said. Voice calm but edged with steel. "She was supposed to be here." Emma's throat felt dry. "Yes, she asked me to come instead. I told her it wasn't right, but she insisted. I can go, really. I don't want to waste your time." She half rose from her chair, desperate to flee, but his next words froze her. "Stay." This time, his tone was lower, steadier, as if he wasn't requesting, he was deciding. Something flickered in his eyes, not quite anger, not quite curiosity. Whatever it was, it unsettled her even more than if he'd shouted. Emma sat back down, her heart pounding so loud she wondered if he could hear it. The waiter approached quietly, placing menus before them. Alexander dismissed the man with a nod, never taking his eyes off Emma. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled together. "I don't like games. Miss Emma," she whispered. Emma Carter. Emma, he repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of her name. You're not the woman I was told to meet tonight. But you're here. She swallowed. Only because she pushed me into it. I swear I. He cut her off again, his eyes narrowing just slightly. Then let's see why. Emma's chest tightened. She didn't know if he meant why her sister sent her, or why he was choosing to let her stay. Emma sat stiffly, wishing she could melt into the plush chair and vanish. The restaurant's soft lighting only seemed to highlight how out of place she was. Around them, elegant couples dined on meals she couldn't even pronounce, their laughter rising like polished music. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, certain that at any moment he'd dismiss her, call her a fraud, and walk away. But Alexander Hayes didn't move. He studied her in silence, his gray eyes calculating. As though she were some puzzle he intended to solve. Finally he spoke. You're nothing like your sister. The words weren't said cruelly. They were spoken with quiet certainty, almost as if he were stating a fact from a business report. Still, Emma flushed, lowering her gaze. You've met Clara before then? No, he replied, his tone clipped. But I've read enough about her. Society pages make her sound like she never walks into a room without expecting all eyes on her. His gaze lingered on Emma. You, on the other hand, look like you'd prefer if no one noticed you walked in at all. Emma's lips parted, caught between indignation and the sting of truth. That's because no one ever does. She murmured before she could stop herself. Alexander tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. For the first time that evening, a flicker of something softer crossed his expression, curiosity, maybe even interest. Is that so? Emma realized what she had admitted and quickly tried to cover it. Look, Mr. Hayes. I didn't come here to play games or trick you. I didn't even want to be here. My sister made me. I know you were expecting her, and I know I'm a disappointment. She forced a nervous laugh. But her throat tightened. So if you'd rather end this now, I understand. As she braced herself already halfway to rising from her seat again. But then his voice cut through her panic. Sit. The single word had a strange effect on her. It wasn't commanding this time, but steady, grounding. She sat back down slowly, confused. Alexander leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table. You think you're a disappointment because you're not her. But let me be clear, I didn't agree to this dinner to be impressed by a pretty face. I wanted to meet someone real. Emma blinked at him, stunned. Real. Yes, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Someone who doesn't treat life like a stage. Someone who means what they say. His gaze sharpened, pinning her in place. So tell me, Emma Carter, what do you mean? As she hesitated, her heart pounding. No one had ever asked her a question like that. Not her parents, not Clara, certainly not anyone with power or wealth. And yet, staring into the eyes of a man who could have dismissed her with a snap of his fingers, she felt an unexpected pull. So she told the truth. I mean, I'm just trying to survive, she whispered. I work 2 jobs to pay off debts that aren't even mine. I don't go to fancy restaurants, I don't wear designer dresses. I don't belong in your world, Mr. Hayes. She looked down, twisting the strap of her bag again. But I belong to myself, and that has to be enough. The silence that followed was heavy, but not cold. When she finally dared to lift her gaze, Alexander Hayes wasn't sneering. He wasn't even frowning. He was watching her with an intensity that unsettled her far more than disapproval would have. For the first time that night, the man known for being unshakable looked as though she had caught him off guard. Emma's heart hammered as the silence stretched. Alexander's gaze didn't waver, and the weight of it was too much. She pushed her chair back slightly, her fingers fumbling with her bag. I really should go, she said, her voice trembling. You don't owe me your time, Mr. Hayes. This whole thing was a mistake, and I've already embarrassed myself enough. Stop. The word landed firm, low, but not cruel. It carried a quiet authority that made her freeze mid-motion. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she lowered herself back into the chair. Alexander leaned forward, his sharp features illuminated by the flickering candlelight between them. He wasn't looking at her like she was an imposter anymore. He was looking at her as if she was something he wanted to understand. He said his a mistake. He said, his voice steady. But I don't believe in accidents, Miss Carter. If you're sitting here, there's a reason. Emma shook her head quickly. The reason is my sister wanted a night off, and she shoved me into her mess. That's all. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Though his eyes remained unreadable. Maybe. Or maybe fate decided I'd had enough of shallow conversations and empty smiles. He let the words hang for a moment before adding, "Tell me something. Why did you really stay?" She faltered. I didn't want to be rude, and you're intimidating. Her cheeks burned at her own honesty. And maybe I was a little curious. About you. His brows rose slightly, but instead of amusement, there was approval in his eyes. Good. Curiosity is honest. The waiter appeared quietly, placing their meals before them. Emma stared at the artful arrangement on her plate, suddenly aware that she didn't even know which fork to use. Her hand hovered uncertainly, but before she could choose, Alexander spoke again. What do you value most? The question caught her off guard. She glanced up to find his eyes fixed firmly on hers, no hint of mockery in them. She swallowed. I value kindness. Honesty. The little things people do when no one is watching. They matter more than money or titles. His jaw tightened slightly, his expression unreadable. But she noticed the faintest flicker of something in his eyes. Something that almost looked like relief. And what do you fear most? He pressed. Emma hesitated, but the weight of his gaze urged her forward. Wasting my life pretending to be something I'm not, she whispered. The words seemed to echo between them. Alexander leaned back, studying her like a man hearing a language he hadn't known he longed for. His face softened, just a fraction, as though she had passed some unspoken test. When she reached for her bag again, murmuring about leaving, his hand moved. Not touching hers, but resting firmly on the table between them. Blocking her path. Don't, he said quietly. You think you've embarrassed yourself tonight, Miss Carter. You're wrong. For the first time in a very long while, I'm having a real conversation. And I'm not letting you walk away from it. Emma froze breathless. No man of his stature had ever spoken to her that way, not with possession, not with authority, but with a strange, undeniable sincerity. And in that moment, she realized she wasn't just surviving a dinner anymore. She was standing at the edge of something that could change everything. The evening stretched on, far longer than Emma had intended. When she'd first stepped through the restaurant doors, she had sworn she wouldn't last 5 minutes. She'd planned to apologize, explain the mistake, and disappear before anyone could laugh at her for pretending she belonged. Yet here she was, an hour later, still seated across from Alexander Hayes, the man whose gaze seemed to pin her to the world like she mattered. The table between them held empty glasses and half-finished plates, but Emma barely remembered eating. The food, though exquisite, was a blur. What she did remember, what she would never forget, were the questions he had asked and the way he had listened. Really listened. No one ever did that with her. Not her parents, who had always compared her to Clara. Sighing when Emma failed to shine as brightly as her sister. Not Clara herself, who dismissed her as boring, invisible, plain. Certainly not the men she'd met before. Who never looked past her second-hand clothes and quiet voice. But Alexander had. And now as the night drew to its end, Emma was desperate to escape before she said something foolish enough to ruin it. She cleared her throat and reached again for her bag. I should let you go, Mr. Hayes. Thank you for your time. I know this wasn't the evening you were expecting. His eyes narrowed slightly at her words. No, it wasn't. The bluntness stung, though she told herself she shouldn't care. He was a CO, a man leagues out of her world. Of course he'd be disappointed. Clara was beautiful, dazzling, the kind of woman who turned heads and set rooms ablaze with energy. Emma was just Emma. She stood quickly, hoping to leave before tears betrayed her. I'm sorry for wasting your night. But before she could take a step, his voice, low and firm, stopped her. Sit down, Emma. The way he said her name made her pulse stutter. Not coldly. Not commanding. Though there was power in it. It was something else, something unshakable. Slowly, hesitantly, she lowered herself back into the chair. Alexander leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his gaze unwavering. Do you really think you wasted my time tonight? Didn't I? For the first time all evening, Something like frustration crossed his face. Not at her, but at the idea itself. Do you have any idea how many dinners I've sat through where people only wanted my money, my name, or the headlines that come from being seen with me? Do you know how many times I've looked across a table and realized there was nothing real in front of me? Emma blinked, startled. She shook her head slowly. Too many, he said flatly. Then his voice softened. Almost imperceptibly. But tonight was different. Emma's heart raced, but she forced a laugh, brittle and nervous. Because you didn't get the woman you were supposed to meet. His lips curved into something between a smirk and a genuine smile. No. Because I got the woman I was meant to meet. Her breath caught. She couldn't look away from him, even as every instinct screamed that he couldn't possibly mean it. He didn't know her. He didn't understand what a mistake this was. You don't have to say that. She whispered. Clara. She's the one you were promised. She's not you. Alexander interrupted, his tone leaving no room for doubt. He leaned closer, and his eyes held hers with startling intensity. And I don't want her. Emma froze, every part of her stunned. You walked in tonight expecting me to send you away. He continued, his voice steady, deliberate. You thought you'd be dismissed, embarrassed. But instead, you sat here and told me the truth. You showed me a side of life that no one in my world dares to show. You're not playing a role, Emma. You're not trying to sell me an image. You're just you. His words tangled in her chest, stirring something she hadn't felt in years. Something dangerously close to hope. But I don't belong in your world. She said softly, her voice breaking. Alexander's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. Maybe it's my world that doesn't belong in yours. The simple honesty of it made her throat ache. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. But it wasn't empty. It was charged alive, carrying the weight of every word unsaid. Emma stared at him, searching for any sign that he was joking, mocking, anything to make this easier to dismiss. But there was nothing in his face but quiet certainty. And then, as if fate itself had decided to intervene, a small sound broke the spell. From the corner of the restaurant, a soft, high-pitched giggle floated toward them. Emma turned instinctively. A little boy no older than 6, sat at a nearby table with a nanny, a coloring book spread before him. His dark hair and sharp gray eyes made the resemblance undeniable. Alexander noticed her stare. His expression shifted, softened. That's my son, he said quietly. Emma's breath caught. Of course, she had heard he was a single father. But she hadn't expected to see it so vividly in front of her. The boy glanced up, caught his father's gaze, and waved. Alexander's stern features melted into the faintest smile, as he lifted a hand in return. The sight did something to Emma's heart. She saw in that moment not the cold, untouchable CEO, but a man, a father, whose entire world existed in the small figure at the other table. And somehow, impossibly, she felt honored that he had let her see it. When she looked back at him, her eyes were softer, her walls thinner. He's beautiful, she murmured. Alexander's gaze lingered on her, unrateable. He deserves someone in his life who understands what matters, not wealth, not power, but values. The kind you spoke of tonight. Her chest tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want your sister, he said firmly, his eyes locking onto hers. I want you. The words hit her like a tidal wave. She blinked rapidly, shaking her head. You barely know me. I know enough, he countered. I know you're honest, and kind, and strong enough to sit here tonight, when every part of you wanted to run. I know you see people. Not what they can give you, not how they can elevate you, but who they are. And I know I'd be a fool to let you walk out that door. A tears pricked her eyes before she could stop them. She wasn't used to being chosen. Not over Clara, not for who she truly was. Emma pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, trying to steady herself. This doesn't make sense, she whispered. His voice softened. Maybe not. But sometimes the best things don't. For the first time that night, Emma allowed herself to hold his gaze fully. No walls, no apologies, just raw, vulnerable truth, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, scandal, confusion, maybe even Clara's wrath. But as Alexander Hayes sat across from her, unshakable in his decision, Emma realized one thing with startling clarity. This blind date, never meant for her, had just changed her life forever.